my water just broke. I felt like things really intensify.
She was right there and she was coming.
It was an amazing feeling.
I'm going to cry just thinking about it. I could feel her head.
We heard her cry. We were squeezing hands and she was screaming.
I'm Bryn Hunt Palmer, and you're listening to The Birth Hour. This podcast is designed as a safe place to come together and share childbirth stories. Stick around and join us to hear informative and empowering birth journeys from all over the world. Today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Pregnancy and new parenthood can be extremely stressful, and many struggle with their mental health, which is why we want you to check out betterhelp.com/birthhour. We talk a whole lot about mental health on this podcast, and I truly believe everyone should be seeking therapy during this time of massive change in your life as you're entering parenthood. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist so you can connect in a safe and private online environment, and you can start within 48 hours of signing up. BetterHelp is not a crisis line. It's professional counseling done securely online where you can send a message to your counselor anytime, plus you can schedule a weekly video or phone session. I love that you can do all of this without ever having to leave your home, something that can be really challenging if you just had a baby. BetterHelp matches you with a counselor based on questions you answer during sign-up, and they make it easy and free to change counselors if needed. BetterHelp is more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid is available. As a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting our sponsor at betterhelp.com/birthhour. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/birthhour. At the end of this episode, I speak with Hesu, a therapist who works with BetterHelp, all about how the service works and what you can expect. So stay tuned at the end of this episode for that conversation and join over 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/birthhour to get started. Today's guest is Charity, and she is back on the Birth Hour to share her twins' birth story. She was previously on sharing her first two children's births on episode 338, which you can access via our archives on Patreon. I've linked to her episode specifically from the show notes page if you want to check that out. And if you're new to the Birth Hour and you're not aware of our Patreon option, that is a way to support the Birth Hour starting at just $1 a month. And with that, you get access to all of our archived episodes, which is additional 500 episodes not available in your main podcast feed. There's also other perks and bonuses that come with becoming a Patreon member, and you can find out about the different options and tiers at patreon.com/birthhour. All right, let's get to Charity's story. Hi, Charity. Welcome back to the Birth Hour. Thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to share another birth story.
Yeah, before we get into your story, will you remind listeners a little bit about you?
Yeah, of course. So I am a mom of 4. That's different than the last time I was on the podcast. Right. I've doubled my kid count in one fell swoop. So I have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and then 1-year-old twin. So it's been a year since the twins' births, but it's been a total blur. So I'm finally able to sit down and think about it and be able to record this podcast, which I'm excited about. But my family and I, we just relocated from London, which is where all my kids were born, in the UK. We now live in Utah. This has been a really big change for all of us, but I think a good move for this stage in our life. And my professional background is in education, but now I'm the full-time caretaker for our kids. So 4 kids in 4 years. It's been a wild adventure, but never boring. I'll say that.
Yeah, I hear that a lot from twin parents about the first year just being like such a blur. So
it's hard to know which way is up sometimes, but I think I was pretty prepared for twins to be crazy. I mean, nobody can truly prepare you for the challenges of it and how crazy it is, but I especially wasn't prepared for how awesome it is. It's really, really amazing to have 2 babies.
All right. So you were on the podcast previously, episode 338, and shared your first 2 kiddos' births, like you said, in the UK. But today we're going to hear the twins' birth. So let's start with just finding out you were pregnant. And then, of course, that moment where you find out you're pregnant with twins is always fun to hear about.
It is wild. So yeah, my husband and I decided after, a little while with our 2 boys that we wanted to try for a 3rd baby. We thought, maybe that will complete our family. And we got 2. But we were really, really thrilled to be pregnant. And just a little background on twins is that both my husband and I were very clear and pretty vocal about how we would never want twins, ever. When I was 19, my oldest sister, she is 16 years older than me. I'm the 9th of 9 kids, and she's the first of 9 kids. So big family, but she had twins when I was 19. She had 3 older kids. Her oldest was 5. So she had 5 kids in 5 years. And when she had her twins, I actually moved in with her to help her. At the time, it worked out that I had a break from school. And so I was able to go live with her and help her with her kids and with her 2 newborns. And to be honest, that experience was pretty traumatic. It was really, really cool to see 2 babies, but it made me never want to have twins. And I had talked about this even before we got married, that we just would never want twins. Like, people say that's fun and that's cute, but no thanks. So that is kind of just some background on how we felt about it. I had started to feel like I was showing a little bit earlier with my 3rd pregnancy. But I felt like, it's my 3rd pregnancy. I'm chasing after 2 little boys. My body's done this before, so I didn't really think that much of it. But I do remember one night laying in bed and having this little niggle of maybe it's twins. And I locked that away, put the padlock on, no, I'm not having twins. I don't want twins. So that's kind of how I went into the pregnancy, ironically.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I know that so many people would love to have twins. And it's such a blessing, especially now that I'm experiencing it. I know that, but it's just not something that I ever wanted.
I feel like so many kids, I had a lot of friends growing up that wanted twins. And it's when you're a kid, it sounds really fun, dress them alike. And you have no idea how much work it actually is.
It's so fun. Yeah. And so because I knew the reality of that work, having seen it happen to my sister, I was like, right. It's not extra fun. It's just really hard. So when I went to my 13-week ultrasound, 12, 13 weeks, which is just standard in the UK, you're always so excited to go and see the baby, make sure everything's good and healthy. I was feeling really nervous, but I thought that was just because, I just wanted the baby to be healthy. But I actually had to go by myself. So this was April 2020. So right in the midst of the COVID pandemic, and my husband wasn't allowed to come with me. So I went by myself to the hospital, and I went to the ultrasound room and just so excited to see that baby. And she put the wand on my belly, and for this quick millisecond, I could see kind of 2 distinct things. So it kind of made me think what's going on there? But within seconds of putting the wand on my belly, she said, okay, so this is a twin pregnancy. And I sat up in the chair and I looked at her and I said, are you serious? And she looked at me kind of why would I joke about that? This is my job. I would never joke with somebody that they're having a multiple birth. And she said, yes, I'm serious. And I just started sobbing. I was just so overwhelmed. Just so many thoughts running through my head. Everything from the profound, how will I take care of both of these babies? How will I take care of my older kids? This is going to change the trajectory of my life completely, all the way down to silly things how in the world are we going to name 2 babies? Because my husband and I, we don't always align on the naming bit. I was just so overwhelmed. And to be honest, the feelings that I felt at that moment were horror and terror. It was I just was not happy about it. And then on top of that, I felt guilty for not being happy about it, because I know so many people are longing for a baby and would just love to have twins. So I also felt guilty that I wasn't excited, but I just was so overwhelmed. So I'm just sobbing through the whole ultrasound. The tech was really kind, and she did tell me that I had the most uncomplicated type of twin pregnancy, which is great news. Both of my babies had their own placenta and their own sac, which just makes everything easier and simpler and more safe for mom and babies. But I couldn't believe it. I was just in complete shock, and I was terrified and horrified.
Yeah, that's a lot to process. I'm sure so many twin moms can relate to that.
But then the guilt on top of it of not being excited, But yeah. I come out just sobbing, and everybody, I'm sure, thinks I've lost a baby. Or I call my husband, and he was really, really great. He told me later that he was actually really excited, but he didn't tell me in that moment, which was a good move, because I just needed somebody to kind of mourn with me. You're mourning the life that you thought you would have. It completely changes the trajectory of your life in that instant. And so that whole thing was just very intense. But as time went on, we told more people and talked about it more, we were able to just kind of process it more and kind of settled into the fact that we were having 2 babies. So it was wild.
Okay, so maybe remind people a little bit about what your previous births were, and then let's talk about how you went forward for seeking care for a twin birth.
So my first two births were totally opposite of each other in my experience. My first son was born on the operating table right before they were about to begin preparations for an emergency C-section. He started crowning. So he was born vaginally there in the operating room. It was very stressful and quite traumatic and very heavily medicated. And then my second birth, kind of to rewind that a little bit, I chose to have a home birth. And it was peaceful and beautiful. And my second son was born in an inflatable birth tub in our little living room in our little London flat. So they were really, really different from each other, but both really powerful experiences. But because I had had such a positive experience with an unmedicated birth and quite a traumatic experience with a medicated birth, that's not to say, of course, that that's always the case. I know a lot of people have some trauma when it's unmedicated, and a lot of people have a wonderful experience with a medicated birth. Just for me, I loved birthing unmedicated and without intervention, and just letting my body do its thing and letting my baby come when he was ready. So I was really hoping, when I first found out I was pregnant for the third time, I was really hoping for a repeat home birth. And it turned out that the same midwife who provided care and assisted with my home birth, she could attend our next birth. And so we were really excited about setting that all up. Now, when I found out I was having twins, I just took some time to reflect on what felt the most safe to me. And I believe that what is most important in birth is that the mother feels safe, that they get to be in a place where they feel safe, because that is what will allow the physiological process of birth to happen the most smoothly and best for baby and mom. And as I reflected on that, I just felt like with twins, having two babies, if they come early, all of the different things that I felt safest having the babies in hospital. And so we decided to go in that direction. Luckily, the midwife that had attended our home birth, she actually worked at our local hospital. It's kind of a little miracle how that all worked out. So she was able to do all of my appointments with me and kind of help me in all of my preparations. And just having that familiarity was really huge for me. So we decided to go forward with having the babies in the hospital. And I was just really hoping that she could attend the birth with me.
Yeah, that's a really great set of circumstances, all things considered.
It really worked out amazing. We weren't sure if all the timing was going to align for her to be able to be there. But spoiler alert, it did, and she was there, and that was amazing. But just, having her care was really huge, especially just deciding what we were going to do with the twin birth. When I found out I was having twins, I thought, I'm going to have to read all these new books. I'm going to have to learn a whole new set of things about birthing. But I realized that actually it's the same. It's the same process. There's just two babies. Of course, there are a few things that are different and that you need to consider, but it's just your body doing the same amazing work. It's just, there's two babies in there. But there are a couple of stipulations that most healthcare providers have for birthing twins, at least in the UK, but I think this is the same in the US. And those are that baby A, so the baby closest to your cervix, needs to be head down. If baby B is breached, it's not usually a problem because it will depend on the healthcare provider, but because baby A has kind of paved the way, they're not as worried about baby B presenting bum first or feet first, because there's kind of a passage for them to come through that's been made by their sibling. But then also most healthcare providers want mothers birthing twins to have an epidural and to birth in the operating room. And the reason for that is that if baby A comes out and there's a problem with baby B, you're ready to have a C-section right away. Crazily enough, that is actually what happened to my sister who had twins. She had what they call a double whammy birth, where she birthed her first baby vaginally, and then her second baby flipped around and was actually presenting with his hands first, his arms first, and so they had to do a C-section. But so that was just something that I needed to think about in my birth prep if I wanted to follow those guidelines of having the epidural and birthing the babies in the operating room. Those were just both things that I just really didn't want to do. Again, I just had such a great experience with an unmedicated birth. And I just felt, if I dug deep into my intuition, that was what was best for me and my babies, was to have an unmedicated birth and to forego the epidural and to be able to be in a safe, dark, quiet, warm place rather than a big, bright operating room with people rushing around and all of those things. So Sarah was my midwife who had attended my home birth. She helped to connect me to a consultant midwife who is basically just like a senior midwife at the hospital, but she ran a program at our hospital called Birth Choices, where she would help them to come up with a birth plan and then help to disseminate that birth plan to all those who might be involved in helping with the birth. And so I met this woman, Natalie, and she was just amazing. We just clicked. I loved everything that she said. I felt really comfortable with her. I just really loved her. And we had worked it out that both she and Sarah could probably attend the birth of my twins. And that was amazing. Anyway, she helped me come up with a birth guide to disseminate to those who might be attending when I was having the babies. We like to call it a birth guide because you can't plan on anything in birth, as I learned from previous experience. I was just able to outline my preferences, which were that I wanted to forego that epidural and be able to give birth just in a regular labor room, kind of with having created my own nest there. So that's kind of how we got ready for the big day.
Okay. And how did you feel during your pregnancy physically?
So up to about 26 weeks, it felt like my previous pregnancies. I'm really lucky I don't get sick when I'm pregnant. I almost feel guilty saying that to something that pregnant women will listen to. But I don't vomit. I don't really get nauseous. So I felt great for the first 26 weeks. And for some reason, just like there was a very clear line around then, 26 weeks, where after that, it felt like I was carrying more than one baby. And it just felt really intense. The only way that I feel like I can describe it is it was just wearing. My body and my spirit were just so tired from creating two babies. I was extremely uncomfortable. And from then on, I just felt like 10 weeks ahead. So at 26 weeks, I felt like 36 weeks. I ended up getting to 38 weeks. And I felt like I was 48 weeks. I was just uncomfortable. It was just hard. It was just wearing on my body. So by the time it was time for the babies to be born, I was ready for them to come out.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common with, all pregnancies, but especially twins.
Especially too, carrying two humans around.
Yeah. All right, well, anything else from the pregnancy you want to share about?
Well, one thing to mention is that we did have a breech baby towards the end of the pregnancy. So I was sad about that. I really wanted to have a vaginal birth, mostly because I just didn't want to deal with the recovery of a C-section, especially with two babies. And also I just wanted to give my babies the benefits of a vaginal birth. And that was my biggest hope. So I was sad that I had that breech baby A and was even considering finding healthcare providers that would help me to deliver a breech baby A vaginally. But so I went to town on all the things to try to make baby flip. So all the spinning babies exercises, I went to a chiropractor trained in pregnancy positioning. I did acupuncture. I even burned a Chinese herb by my pinky toe, which is supposed to relax the uterus. I did everything I could think of. When we went to our 36-week ultrasound, you do get more ultrasounds when you have a twin pregnancy, which is pretty fun to see the babies more often. But we went into that ultrasound and baby A was presenting head first, and we were so happy. So I don't remember feeling him flip, but somehow he was able to get in the right position. So that was just a part of the pregnancy that was challenging, but then turned out really good. Another thing to point out is that my parents came from the US to be there for the birth and to help after the babies are born, which normally wouldn't be a huge deal. But this was September, October 2020. So US citizens were still not allowed to come to the EU. Luckily, they were allowed to come to the UK, but they had to quarantine upon arrival. So my parents are amazing. They came all the way over. They found a little Airbnb in the countryside that they could quarantine in for 2 weeks and not go anywhere. And then they came to London. That's just relevant because having them there made me want the babies to come, right? We all get so excited as we get closer to the end of pregnancy for babies to come. But my parents had not only come, but they had quarantined for 2 weeks, and then they were sitting there waiting with us for the babies to be born. So about 35 weeks was when they arrived in London. And so at that point we were like, okay, we're ready for these babies to come. I had thought that I would have the babies early. I think when you think of twins, you just think they're going to come early. My sister who had twins had hers. She went into labor spontaneously at 36 weeks. So I just thought we're going to have a few weeks early on these babies. But as I learned more, I actually read a statistic that if you take out any scheduled cesareans, any scheduled inductions, that the average gestational age for twins is 39.1 weeks. So plenty of twins make it to 40 weeks. Some make it beyond 40 weeks. And I just didn't know that. I just assumed that they would come early spontaneously because I did not want to get induced. But I got, to 37 weeks. They were still cooking. And then I got to 37 and a half weeks and I started getting pressure from healthcare providers to induce. They wanted to induce at 38 weeks just to make sure that the placentas were still giving the babies plenty of nutrients. But I just really didn't want to be induced. So I was hoping that I could go into labor spontaneously. But I also had my parents that had now been in London for like 5 weeks waiting for these babies to come. So at the end, it was starting to get pretty anxious. We were wanting them to come out. And I was feeling incredibly uncomfortable, as I mentioned.
Yeah, that's a lot of extra balls to juggle as far as other people's schedules and everything.
Right, exactly.
All right. Well, I'm so curious now how labor did start for you.
Well, one day I was feeling so I don't want to be induced. We had an induction date set, but I was planning on just canceling it and just moving forward. But one day I went on a walk by myself and I was just trying to really dig deep inside of myself into my mother's intuition about what we should do about getting these babies out. If we should continue the pregnancy or if we should go for the induction. And I really believe that pregnant women have this power and this knowledge that we can just dip into if we'll stop and be still and listen. And so I was out on a beautiful autumn day in London and I just had this kind of stroke of inspiration is what it felt like to me. That one thing that was so important to me with the birth is that Sarah and Natalie, so that midwife that had attended my second birth and that consultant midwife that I just loved who had helped so much with my birth guide, I just wanted them there. And it just sort of hit me that if I scheduled the induction, I could guarantee that they would be there. And so then I could have that bit of it that I really wanted and I really felt would be advantageous to the safety and health of myself and my babies. And so I decided, let's do it. That's worth it to me. I didn't want to be induced because I know that it can lead to a lot more interventions. And I just didn't want to deal with synthetic oxytocin and all this other stuff. But I felt like the benefit of having Sarah and Natalie there with me and having my team just would outweigh any risks or disadvantages. And so then I decided to just lean into all the benefits of a scheduled birth. So I got childcare set up for my older kids. I packed in my bag. Everything was totally ready. I knew exactly when we were going to go in. There's a lot of benefits to that. It felt different to think about it in relation to human schedules rather than some cosmic timing. But I decided to just lean into all the benefits of that. So I did decide to go with the induction. We were hopeful that all it would take was a manual breaking of my waters, because in my previous births, once my waters broke, that really kicked things off. And so I thought she can just break my water and that will get things started. And maybe I will be able to avoid the Pitocin completely. But we decided, to just go for the scheduled birth and lean into the benefits of that.
So how did it go for you? What time of day did they have you come in? And what did it look like with COVID? I know there's probably some things that were different.
Yeah. What a wild time to have a baby.
Yes.
Luckily, we were at a good point then when my husband could come with me and cases were pretty low in London at that point. So it felt pretty okay. I was able to labor without a mask. I was really worried about that for a long time. But they told us that we would be coming in the afternoon. But it turned out that was a popular day to have babies, I guess, because the labor ward was completely full for hours and hours. So we were just waiting for word from Natalie that we should come in to the hospital. So it got to be 3 p.m., 5 p.m. And we actually didn't go into the hospital until about 7 o'clock at night. So we got in a classic black London taxi cab and we drove to the hospital, came back when we forgot our camera, and then went back again. So everything was just a little bit delayed, or a lot delayed in the end. But we got in about 7:30 and they wanted to monitor the baby's heart rates for a little while, half an hour, to really just get an idea of a baseline heart rate for both of the babies to be able to watch during the birth. So that took a while. And then, it just took a while to get prepped and to get settled. So it wasn't until about 9 p.m. that I got my waters broken. And until that moment, I hadn't really thought about timing. I hadn't really thought about the fact that, this is going to be a through the night labor. I might be really tired. I just was so excited. about meeting my babies. But at 9 o'clock, she broke the waters. And unfortunately, our baby A, he had turned head down, which was great, but he'd really engaged down there. So the sac was really close to his head and it was quite difficult to break the waters. I was expecting a gush, but we just got a trickle. And so I don't know exactly why, but it didn't really kick things off very much. So my husband and I were walking the halls of the hospital. It's completely empty by now. It's like 10, 11 p.m. We're walking up and down stairs, trying to do everything we can to kick labor off, and like every little sensation I feel, I'm like, is that a contraction? Oh no, I just went down a stair, or that's some digestion or whatever. But I was that began hours and hours of me just praying for contractions. I just wanted the intensity so bad because I knew that that's what would help our babies come. They had said after they broke the waters, they would want to start on the Pitocin after 2 hours. And we kind of pushed that off for a little while. We tried to nap a little bit. I was woken up from a nap about 1 a.m. with a very clear contraction. So I knew that, okay, now things are kicking off. At that point, we actually moved rooms on the labor ward because a pool room had become available. And I loved laboring in the water with my second birth. So we thought that we would use the pool. So we moved rooms. I actually didn't end up using the pool at all. But we moved to a different room. By this time, we're getting close to 2 a.m. I'm having contractions pretty consistently, but they're not intense. They're pretty mild. And Natalie took me aside as we moved to this new room. We kind of set it up with some twinkle lights and with blankets we brought from home, kind of made our little nest. And she was so loving and great without any type of pressure. She just said to me, Charity, I'm worried about your energy levels. We're getting to the wee hours. You haven't slept. You need some energy to get 2 babies out. She also said, when 12 hours have passed, Sarah and I are going to have to leave. It's a shift change, and it's policy that we can't work longer than a certain amount of time. There was also a doctor on that was working then that I really liked. They had brought him in so I could meet him. He seemed wonderful. He seemed very hands-off, and I wanted him to be there too. So she kind of alerted me to the fact that, like, if I didn't get the babies out in the next few hours, there would be new people there. And that was like the whole point of me going with the induction, was that I wanted my people there. And so I realized, okay, we got to kick this off. So we connected the IV, and just with the lowest dose of Pitocin, and that just did the trick. The contractions started coming really regularly and with a lot more intensity. It was interesting to me that something about like the combination of my natural oxytocin going on and that synthetic oxytocin mixing together, I didn't have like a gradual increase of intensity of my contractions. And it was frustrating for me because I'd have a really big one, and then I'd have a really mild one, and then I'd have a medium one for a while. And whereas with my previous births, it was like very clear that they were getting more intense over time. And so that was frustrating for me because I didn't know if I was making progress. That was kind of my gauge before. But after a while, they actually disconnected the IV because I had kind of started rolling on my own. And then I just labored. I just labored and labored and labored. It felt like an eternity. But just for a few hours, I was changing positions and just kind of breathing through all of the contractions. Sarah was amazing. Our midwife, she was rubbing my back with oils. My husband is just like a rock star birth partner. He was right there with me, repeating my mantras for me. My biggest birth mantra is, it's not pain, it's power. He would remind me of that over and over again. And that is so true for me. I know that the sensation of contracting and of laboring is really different for different women, but for me, I wouldn't describe it as pain. It's just intense. It's really intense. And when I reminded myself that that intensity is power that is going to bring 2 children into the world, that really pumped me up, and that helped me to get through the contractions. So I just kind of kept laboring for what felt like a long time, not really knowing if I was making progress because I didn't want vaginal checks. I knew that that dilation number didn't mean anything, at least for me, because in my first birth, I went from a 3 to a 10 in 15 minutes. So it didn't really matter how dilated I was. The babies were going to come when they were ready to come, and my body was ready to transition. So I didn't really know what was happening. I just kind of tried to get through all of that work. with the support of this amazing team around me. I did experience something new in this birth, which was that I got the shakes. So my body was shaking a lot, and not just like a tremor. Like I was shaking a lot, and that took a lot of energy. So that kind of made it hard. And I mean, also it was like 4, 5 in the morning by now, right? So, and I hadn't slept. So I was really tired. But at one point, I don't know if it was just my mind willing it to happen. I was just like ready to be done. But at one point I got up on the bed and I was kneeling up with my hands on the top of the bed, which was like reclined up, if that makes sense. So kind of an all fours position. And I thought I was transitioning and baby A was going to come. And clearly everybody else got the memo because I saw everybody like rushing around preparing for the second stage. But it turned out it was a false alarm. The intensity petered out and the baby was not ready to come yet. So at that point, I did consent to a vaginal check. Sarah just said, let's just see how you're doing. I don't have to tell you any numbers, but like, let's just see what progress we've made. So she did a check, and she didn't tell me then, but she told me later that I was at a 6. So I wasn't really that close. She just said, we have some more work to do. And so I kind of settled back into realizing that I needed to labor a little bit longer. But at this point, it was probably 5:30 in the morning. And I knew that around 7, my people were leaving. And so that's when my brain really kicked into gear and was like, we got to get these babies out. Like, we've done all this preparation. I've consented to this induction for this reason. These babies need to come. And so I just was really working hard on my brain and my body working together to get these babies to come out. We did reconnect the IV to give me a little bit more of that Pitocin to kind of kick things off again, brought some more intensity. And at this point, we had gone over into the next day, right? So now it was October 13th, and that's actually my grandma's birthday. I was really close to my grandma before she'd passed when I was 9. But I've always felt close to her, and I have a strong belief that those that haven't been born yet exist as spirits, and so do those who have passed on. And so I believe that my babies were with my grandma on her birthday. And so at that point, I started it sounds a little hokey, but I started kind of talking to my grandma, like, okay, you need to let them go. Like, it's time to let the babies come. I was excited that they were going to be born on her birthday. And I just kind of said in my mind, like, Grandma, release their spirits, let them come. Like, they need to be born now. And at some point, I started to feel like I was transitioning. It felt different than that first false alarm. And so I got back in that kneeling position. I really prefer that position for birthing. I loved that with our second son. So I was kind of on all fours on the bed, and this time it was the real deal. And I felt my body transition, and I just bore down, and a baby came out of me. It was so intense and so amazing, but it was really similar to my second birth, where I didn't feel like I pushed at all. I felt like I was bearing down, and then there was nothing I could do to stop this baby from coming out. He was just coming. So it was just wild, that total ring of fire. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I kept saying, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And Sarah told me, you can breathe, just breathe him out. And so our baby boy, our baby A, he came out and was perfectly healthy. And it was so exciting, so in that moment, I'm just flooded with euphoria. And they put the baby on my chest. I'm kneeling up on the bed, but also I'm still contracting. There's still another baby inside of me. I have these monitors strapped to me. And at that point, Natalie had her hands on my belly very firmly. So what she was doing was holding baby B, our baby girl, in place with her head down. Because now she's got a lot of room. So just like with my sister's twins, the concern is that baby B is going to flip around and get in a not good position. So she has her hands on my belly, really holding on tight to baby B, trying to keep her head down. The doctor comes in, because that's just standard procedure with twins, that the OB will come to make sure everything's good with the second birth. But he comes in with a mobile ultrasound machine to make sure that we do have a head down baby B. So all this stuff is happening at once, right? Like, I'm holding a brand new baby, flooded with that euphoria of just having given birth. I have all these wires strapped to me. I have somebody holding onto my belly really tight. And then they're telling me I need to roll over onto my back so that they can take the ultrasound. So it was just like a lot in that moment. And my body's contracting and my body's shaking really hard still. So I still have these crazy shakes. But it ended up that we cut the cord of baby A. My husband was there ready with his shirt off for skin to skin. He's the best. So he took baby A skin to skin, and they checked to make sure that baby B was head down. All looked good. I didn't really realize this was happening because I was just in a blur. But baby B, our baby girl, actually, her heart rate had dropped dramatically when her brother left, which makes sense because her environment has completely changed. But they were concerned about getting her out. So it was actually 14 minutes between the births for me. It felt like about 14 seconds. It was just like a wild flurry. But at that point, everybody in the room was telling me, we got to get her out. She needs to get out now. So I flipped over. They put my feet in stirrups. The bed was a little bit at an angle, so I didn't have to push uphill. But then everybody's just yelling at me to push. And that was not really the way I wanted to give birth. Very chaotic. But I knew I needed to get her out fast. And I really didn't want to have a C-section, especially at that point, right? Or even an instrumental birth. I just wanted to be able to get her out. So everybody's yelling at me to push, and I just pushed like hell. I just pushed so hard. They're all saying push, push, push. And I'm like, the contraction's over. I don't want to be power behind this. But I just kept pushing in between contractions, during contractions. It was probably 3 contractions. And then I pushed her right out. And they brought baby B up to my chest, and my husband gave me back baby A. And there I was with 2 brand new babies cuddling up with me. And my body was just totally in shock. My brain was totally in shock. It was just a wild moment, but just flooded with euphoria and joy and relief. And it was really, really powerful and spectacular. So that's how they came, totally in different ways. My baby A just kind of made his own way. And baby B, we had to push like hell to get her out.
That's so interesting, because you usually hear that the baby B kind of just slides out.
Right. Yeah. And I think the way had been paved, like it was pretty easy for me to push her out. Mm-hmm. Like with the first one, I didn't really have to push, but with the second, I knew I had to get her out fast because of her heart rate. So it was wild.
Yeah. It always is, right?
Yep. But just having those 2 babies, that was a moment where I realized, I said at the beginning that I really didn't want twins, mm-hmm. and that I felt really aware of the challenges, but not very much of the joys. But even just in that moment, having both of them there with me, I was just flooded with this like amazement that I was able to birth 2 babies, and then I had 2 babies. And that's what started me realizing that while there are insane challenges about having multiples, it is so incredible. It's such a unique, incredible, amazing experience that I'm really grateful to experience.
Yeah.
And I say that now, even after a year of intense challenges.
Yeah. And having done a lot of nannying in my younger years too, like I think that your experience with your sister, you didn't have that bond with them. Yes. So it was just the stress, and like you don't love them the same way. So it seems a lot harder probably.
Right. But my sister was one of the first people I told we were having twins. Obviously, she's who I thought of right away. And she said something to me and my husband that really stuck with us. She said, you know what? I promise, it's not double the work, because you're already changing a diaper. You're already getting the baby food made. You're already mixing the bottle, whatever it is. Right. You're already breastfeeding. You just need to do it a little bit longer. She said, it's not double the work, but it really is double the joy. And now having experienced it, I think sometimes it feels like 500 times the work, but most of the time it's not double the work, but it really is double the joy. Like it's really, really incredible.
Oh, that's so great. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the postpartum period where all that work comes into play.
Yeah, it was also intense. So right after I had the babies, then, I delivered the placentas, and then we were able to just have this beautiful time just admiring our new babies and reveling in the joy of it. I felt really proud and really triumphant that we had birthed both of these babies vaginally and unmedicated. I really felt like that's what was best for our family, but also I was just proud that we were able to do it. And the babies did start rooting right away. And so actually their first breastfeed was a tandem breastfeed right away. And that was pretty amazing. But then honestly, my recovery was awesome. It was really, really good. I didn't tear at all. And I think just without any drugs or any contraptions in my body, I was able to just recover really quickly. Babies didn't need any NICU time, which can be rare for twins, but they were, I was at 38 weeks, so they were pretty well developed. But we actually left the hospital within 12 hours of them being born, which was awesome. We drove home that night in the same way through the rain in the dark night in a black London taxi cab back to meet their brothers, which was such a joyous thing too. But my recovery just went really well. I was really grateful for that. And breastfeeding went really well with both babies. So I had to endure the craziness of a twin pregnancy, and the birth was wild, but the postpartum period actually went really well. All was good. So I was really grateful for that.
All right. So do you have any resources you want to share that were new, especially with twins?
So that's just it, though, is I felt like I said earlier, I needed all these new resources for twins. I think the biggest tip that I can share with expectant twin moms is to just remember, especially if you've already had a baby, that it's the same in a lot of ways as having a singleton. So I think the same resources would apply, at least for pregnancy and birth. There's a lot of resources for taking care of two babies, which is like a whole other thing. But I think it's important to remember with a twin birth that your body knows how to do it. And just like with one baby, your body's going to know what to do. And you can trust your intuition in getting those babies here safely.
Yeah, probably the biggest resource for taking care of them is to just have help would be the thing I hear all the time.
Yes, absolutely. So we had a nanny move in with us. We had an au pair for the first few months of the baby's lives. And that was huge, especially with the older kids. That was the biggest challenge for us, was just making sure that we could take care of our older kids.
Right.
But yeah, my mom was there with me. We had a lot of people bringing us meals and things like that. But I did promise myself when I found out we were pregnant with twins that if anybody offered to help me, I would say yes. And I think that is an important thing to do. If you know you're having multiples, accept any and all help and ask for help, because you need all the support you can get. And it takes a village for one baby. It takes a country for two babies.
Yeah, I hear that quite a lot. So I'm glad you had that help available to you. All right. So where's the best place for people to connect with you?
On Instagram, you can find me at Charity Eyre Wright. We can probably put that in the show notes. It is a private account, but I'll accept any followers. And I like to share lots of pictures of my twin babies there and experiences about raising twins, along with the other kids. I also have a blog that's woefully outdated because, I've been a little busy lately, but Wright Now blog. So my last name, nowblog.com. And I have actually the birth story all written out there if you want to look at some more details. And then just other things about having twins and having babies and being a mom in general. So that's something to check out too.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll link to all of that stuff from the show notes page. So thank you so much for sharing your story today.
Thank you. I just appreciated so much being able to listen to other twin birth stories on the birth hour when I was pregnant. So I just hope that there's some expectant twin mom out there that this is helpful for. So thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah, of course. I know there's going to be so many people that get something from this story, whether they're having twins or not. So thanks again for sharing.
Yeah, I think just combining that power of educating ourselves and listening to our intuition, we can have really, really powerful birth stories. And that's what we get to show in this podcast, is that birth can be so empowering and awesome.
Well, thanks again for sharing.
You're welcome. Thank you, Bryn.
All right, now I'm going to talk with Hesu from BetterHelp, today's sponsor. Hi, Hesu. Welcome to the Birth Hour. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today to chat with me about BetterHelp.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here and looking forward to having this conversation.
Great. Well, let's start by having you tell us just a little bit about you and what brought you to the online therapy space.
Sure. Like many therapists out there, I did start in the public sector space. And so I come from the traditional world of community mental health, where I worked for several years. These are therapists working very closely with entities like social services, probation officers, foster care kids. So it's a lot of people with lower socioeconomic status, meaning the access to care is often subsidized. And this is the work that helped me thrive and really learn how to become a therapist, but it also nurtured these skills in terms of case management and seeing the person holistically in the context of the community that they live in too. And during those years, I think like a lot of other people in this setting, found myself getting burned out really quickly, even after I would take time off. And that's a whole other topic and a whole other thing.
Right.
And what I found was this sensation of being bogged down so much by bureaucracy, red tape, all these things that it's like so hard for me to just give care to my clients. That's what I cared about most. And in this time, an opportunity came up. Believe it or not, I just saw something on social media. It was not an advertisement. It was just some informational piece about online therapy. And at the time, this was several years ago, I had never heard of such a concept of providing therapy services digitally, not being in the same room as your client. It was novel at the time. A lot of people were skeptical of it once I started asking people if they had heard of such a thing. But because I was so burned out, I took that opportunity to find a company by just searching online. I found BetterHelp and I applied. Basically, they were looking for someone with a clinical background to join the company and start helping build this thing. And I think I just kind of took a calculated risk of I'm not going to be able to continue a sustainable career where I am, and I just need a change. So at the time, my mind was like, I'm going to try this new weird, tech thing. And then eventually I'll come back to direct practice. That was my plan at the time. But as we all know, a lot of times you fast forward to the future, when that becomes your present, your past plans aren't really applicable anymore. And so I saw it as an opportunity to bring my skills, my passions for making therapy more accessible, advocating for equity and safety in the therapeutic space. I saw an opportunity at BetterHelp to bring this, right, provide more access and even make more of an impact. As a practicing therapist, you can have impact on your 20 to 30 clients, which is great. But I saw this space open up at BetterHelp where I can make an impact on thousands more people that could potentially be benefiting from this service. So that, in a bigger nutshell, is my journey from the traditional world of in-person practice to this new place that I find myself now.
Very cool. So given your background and then the work you've been doing at BetterHelp, I feel like BetterHelp is kind of on the forefront of all of this. So with all of your experience, do you feel like these virtual options can replace in-person therapy as we know it?
The true straightforward answer to me is no. I don't think that virtual options and online therapy can completely replace what is the experience of in-person. For those folks out there that have tried both, you'll probably have noticed these differences too. There's just something very different about being face-to-face in the presence of another person versus seeing them online through video or even just an audio call or a chat. And I think that there is space in this world for mental health care to come in so many different forms. And it's really about finding what makes sense for you on an individual level, what is most effective for you. So while I don't think that these virtual options will ever completely replace in person, I think it's a wonderful supplement or even a complementary thing to exist harmoniously side by side with in-person options, since I've now talked to and, read about so many positive experiences from people that have tried both and found that the online option makes more sense for their lifestyle. At the same time, I know plenty of other people that prefer in person. So I think, in this time, this day, this age, I don't think any of us should be trying to restrict mental health care to one kind of format. There's enough room in this world for all of it.
Yeah, and the more access, the better, right?
Absolutely, yes.
So most of my listeners are new parents, which makes me think the online option would be particularly great for them. But in general, how do you know if the online option for therapy is going to be the best option for you?
Well, something you pointed out here is the convenience and the accessibility piece. It's not just new parents, it's also busy professionals and students that are juggling work and school and folks that might be caregivers and they also cannot leave their home. Like there's so many situations in which the online option presents access. Some folks cannot, carve out the time that it takes to commute to and from a physical office. Some folks don't have, the privilege, luxury, option, whatever you want to call it, to get away from where they are physically to get to a session. So I think the online option is a really good thing to consider if you have barriers in terms of transportation or time. There are situations in which the online option may not be the best for you. And so these are things to consider if you are in crisis or if there's an imminent threat to yourself or to other people. You're probably going to want to reach out to local authorities or emergency services, something that can help you in person. Mm-hmm. If you're dealing with mental health struggles on top of physical ailments, of course, it's probably going to be recommended that you see a doctor or somebody that can hook you up with a coordinated care team, depending on what that looks like. So, I think the online option can be a great choice for you if, generally speaking, you're in a safe environment, you yourself can keep yourself safe, and it's something that is helping you feel better and you're noticing progress. I think it's hard to say whether it's going to be the best option for you unless you try it and try other options that are also available to you.
Okay, and how does it work with BetterHelp as far as matching you with a therapist?
So when a new user comes onto the website or the app, what you're going to do to get started is fill out an intake questionnaire. So there's a couple dozen questions about you and your present condition. We'll ask you about your sleep schedule, your eating style, other things like whether you've been noticing anxious symptoms, depressive feelings, these kinds of things. So it's a bunch of questions to get to know who you are as a person and what you're coming to therapy for. And based on what you're putting into this questionnaire, we'll match that up with the areas of expertise that therapists tell us about on their account, as well as their availability, their licensing, any areas of expertise that they've marked. And we'll do our best to match you with someone that meets your preferences. And then you also have the option to change therapists if you find that the person that we've matched you with is not working out for whatever reason. So changing therapists is very easy, and you can do that on your own from your account at any time. But you can also always consider that you have the option to reach out to us personally. You can always email our team, and somebody will be able to assist narrowing down that search, for example, if you're looking for something very specific.
Okay. And then as far as how the therapy sessions work, what are the different methods of communication that you'd have with your therapist?
So once you get matched with a therapist, you're connected through kind of this messaging portal. So that messaging space is available to you all the time. You can log in. It's just like any kind of messaging app. So you open it up, you can send a message. You can think of that space as more like email. So if I send a message today, I won't be expecting the other person to respond immediately, right? With email, we kind of give this person some hours, maybe a day or so. And really it's the individual therapists that will let you know in the beginning how often you can expect a response from them, how frequently they log in, like that kind of information is going to be very important in those beginning stages for you to figure out if it's a good match too. And so that messaging space is what we call asynchronous. It's not a real-time conversation, but you can send a message, get a message back at some point. Now, that's a supplement to the live session experience. So live sessions are what we, model after the more traditional therapy model is people are meeting generally once a week and having this undivided attention from their therapist for that scheduled time. And you can do that at BetterHelp either through a video session, a live video session. So you do need access to a webcam either on your computer or your smartphone. You can have an audio session, which works through your computer or through your phone. And you can also do a live chat session if written communication is the best way that you can process and feel comfortable talking to somebody.
I think that's so helpful, especially I'm thinking about new moms and just the way our schedules are. I think it'd be so nice to be able to just message when something's on your mind and kind of get that off your chest and then get an answer maybe, the next time you're up in the middle of the night or whatever. I love that flexibility. That's really great.
Yeah, and I've had clients that are new moms, and something I just thought of right now as you're speaking is like, we'll schedule a session, but we won't even confirm right in that moment whether it's going to be phone or chat, because I'm going to wait for my client at the time of the session to let me know what works for them, right? So an example of this is having a client that may or may not be having a phone session depending on whether they can get their baby to sleep for a nap.
Oh, it's so nice.
Yeah. And so I've done a lot of going back and forth of like, well, I had planned for a phone session, but we can certainly do a chat right now if that makes more sense with whatever's going on with you at home.
Right. Like there's a baby in my lap and I can't
Yes.
talk, but I can text. That's great. And also like my experience with therapy too is sometimes you're thinking of things, all week. And then when your session comes around, you like can't think of anything to talk about. And so being able to have that continuous supplemental messaging sounds really great too.
Yeah. And plenty of people use it that way. They'll kind of jot down the raw emotional thought as it's happening.
Right.
With the understanding that the therapist will probably respond with something like, this is great stuff that we can talk about in our next session. And then when you log in for that session, both of you have access to that messaging space. You can see your notes from the past week.
That's great.
So, yeah.
All right, let's talk a little bit about cost, because I know like that can be the biggest barrier, like you talked about in your intro there.
The cost for therapy is so variable. You'll see different hourly kind of fees associated with private practice, or maybe you're going through your insurance, or maybe you're doing a different option. Maybe it's subsidized by your county or your state. So some folks may be entering therapy at no cost out of pocket to them, or it could look like paying $350 for a 1 hour session. Now, BetterHelp falls somewhere in between all of that, and you have options to select from when you're signing up and creating your account. It is a subscription plan model. So basically, you're signing up for a recurring fee, generally on a monthly basis, but I think we have weekly, quarterly, annual options too. So that's something that you can explore. The monthly subscription, it covers like everything, right? Because the way with subscriptions work, you're paying upfront for a certain period of time. And then in that time, regardless of whether you use it a lot or maybe you're not logging in as much this month, that fee stays the same. So you know exactly what to expect when it comes to how much you're paying. And you have a billing settings option in your account settings, so you can always look at that. And how much you're paying is going to be dependent on a variety of factors that you answer about your financial situation and your intake. If you ever find that the cost that you see in front of you is too much or unmanageable, I do want to encourage folks to reach out to our team directly. You can email contact@betterhelp.com, and our team will work with you on an individual basis to try to figure out something that's going to work for you. We do offer financial assistance, and this largely comes from our mission of wanting to make therapy affordable and accessible to everyone.
Yeah, that's so great. Well, thank you for sharing more about that. And then before we go, I just wanted to ask you really quickly about, I know that you guys kind of have a sister company called Regain that's offering couples therapy, which obviously having a baby is one of those big life changes that really changes your relationship. So I want to just share about that with my listeners as well.
Sure. So yes, Regain is one of what we call our specialty sites. And this is a site in which two users can sign up for a joint account. So each person in the relationship, because it's generally used for couples counseling, has their own login info. You use your own email address and password. And so now when you enter that messaging portal, there's three of you, which is you, your partner, and the therapist. And from there, you can start engaging in relationship counseling, couples therapy, whatever you want to call it. I do want to say right now it is available to partners that are in the same location. I say that because if you want to have a joint video session, for example, you do need to be together.
Okay.
And I'm also happy to say that we are working on implementing three-way live sessions sometime very soon.
Okay.
As we understand, the modern couple has evolved, right? A lot of couples no longer are in the same location at the same time all the time. So we're trying to create a new way for folks to engage and get access to this kind of care, even if they're not in the same location.
That's so great. All right. Well, we will link to all of that on the show notes page along with a coupon code. But thank you so much for taking the time today to chat with me more about everything at BetterHelp.
No problem at all. Thank you. It's been my pleasure. And I hope you all take care.
Thank you so much again to Charity for sharing her birth story with us and to BetterHelp for sponsoring this episode. Don't forget you can head over to BetterHelp, HELP.com/birthhour to get started with a 10% off coupon. And if you want more information from today's episode, including that link, you can head over to thebirthhour.com and search for Charity's name in the search bar to find her show notes page. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, head to thebirthhour.com and click Become a Member to pledge your support. And as a thank you, you'll get an invitation to join our private Facebook group and access to exclusive episodes. Your vote of confidence and support means the world to me.